My concern has to do with the tendency to repeat Russian and Syrian, and even in some cases, I think we'll get into in the closed session, Iranian information, and to discount what comes from our intelligence community.
Senator, every American deserves to know that people in our own government were providing support to our sworn enemy, Al-Qaeda. That should not be acceptable by anyone.
Can you explain to me then why you doubted the intelligence community's conclusions in these two cases, Duma and Kanche-Kun, but not the others? And please be specific.
These two cases were being looked at to be used as a pretext for major military movement, and my fear was a repeat of the deployment of another 500,000 soldiers like we saw in Iraq towards what was the Obama administration's goal, which was regime change in Syria. The question specifically that I raised around these two came about because there were two reasons. One, that assessment was made with high confidence and low information.
America is hitting a breaking point right now, and this hearing proved at the moment Senator Mark Kelly tried cornering Tulsi Gabbard, things completely backfired. Instead of folding under pressure, Tulsi Gabbard fired back with a statement that instantly changed the entire mood inside that room. Americans deserve to know whether people inside our own government help support Al-Qaeda. And just like that, the hearing stopped feeling scripted and started feeling real. You could actually feel the tension in Congress, because nobody expected her to go there. If you're tired of fake political theater and media spin, hit like, subscribe, and share this video, because what happened in this hearing deserves a serious conversation.
The information that they had came from those on the ground in an Al-Qaeda-controlled area, and therefore were Al-Qaeda-linked sources. And there was conflicting information that came from the UN's Office on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons inspectors, as well as an MIT professor, Ted Postel,
So I want
who
to
looked
talk
at
about him
these
for a second.
extensively.
So did you look into his credentials, yes or no?
Yes.
And were you aware of his appearances on Russian Today, which is used by the Russians to disseminate government-approved messages?
No.
Were you aware Postel relied on a chemistry student with a record of defending the Assad regime?
At that time, I was not. I have been made aware since.
Do you consider this person or these two individuals now, do you consider them a better source for the chemistry of sarin gas than the U.S. intelligence community?
I assess that at the time, the information, I don't know the second person you're referring to, but MIT professor Ted Postel and the inspectors of the OPCW provided some credible questions that deserved examination.
Okay, thank you. For years, the U.S. analyzed evidence of numerous chemical weapons attacks in Syria. Eventually, we were able to assess that Bashar al-Assad was responsible for a number of these attacks that slaughtered his own civilians. Do you accept the conclusion broadly that Assad used chemical weapons against Syrians?
Yes, and I'm on the record for years of agreeing with that broad assessment.
Thank you. Among the attacks the U.S. assessed Assad was responsible for, two that occurred in Duma and Kanche-Kun in Syria. As a member of Congress and as a presidential candidate, and as recently as this month, in your written responses to this committee, you have cast doubt on the assessment that Assad is culpable in these two attacks. Is that still your position?
Senator, I raised those questions given conflicting information and evidence that was presented at that time.
In 2016, you gave an interview in which you said, and this is a quote, "The U.S. is providing direct and indirect support to terrorist groups in order to overthrow the Syrian government." And in 2019, on the Democratic presidential debate stage, you said of President Trump, this is a quote, "This current president is continuing to betray us. We were supposed to be going after Al-Qaeda, but over years now, not only have we not gone after Al-Qaeda, our president is supporting Al-Qaeda." So I'm interested to hear, what was your goal in saying these things? And did you consider, before saying them, the motives of Iran and Russia, what their motives might have been before making these claims?
Senator, as someone who enlisted in the military specifically because of Al-Qaeda's terrorist attack on 9/11 and committing myself and my life to doing what I could to defeat these terrorists, it was shocking and a betrayal to me and every person who was killed on 9/11, their families and my brothers and sisters in uniform. When, as a member of Congress, I learned about President Obama's dual programs that he had begun really to overthrow the regime of Syria, and being willing to, through the CIA's Timber Sycamore program that has now been made public, of working with and arming and equipping Al-Qaeda in an effort to overthrow that regime, starting yet another regime change war in the Middle East. DoD train and equip program, again, begun under President Obama, is widely been known, looked at, and studied, that ultimately resulted in over $500 million being used to train who they called moderate rebels, but were actually fighters working with and aligned with Al-Qaeda's affiliate on the ground in Syria, all to move forward with their regime change and not acknowledging what was obvious at the time and what has unfortunately borne true, which was that a regime change war in Syria, much like the regime change wars in Iraq, the toppling of Gaddafi and Mubarak, while these are all dictators, would likely result in the rise of Islamist extremists like Al-Qaeda taking power. I shed no tears for the fall of the Assad regime, but today we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
It shouldn't
is
be.
certainly
and
not
I
in our
understand,
interests.
I appreciate your answer, and thank you. My concern has to do with the tendency to repeat Russian and Syrian, and even in some cases, I think we'll get into in the closed session, Iranian information, and to discount what comes from our intelligence community.
Senator, every American deserves to know that people in our own government were providing support to our sworn enemy, Al-Qaeda. That should not be acceptable.
What made this exchange explode online was not just the clash between Tulsi Gabbard and Mark Kelly, it was the fact that millions of Americans watching probably agreed with the bigger question she raised: how many times has Washington dragged this country into disasters overseas while pretending everything was under control? Americans heard the promises in Iraq, we heard them in Libya, we heard them in Afghanistan, and once again in Syria. The public was told the U.S. was supporting so-called moderate rebels, but over time reports, investigations, and whistleblowers raised serious concerns about extremist groups operating alongside some of those same fighters, including groups tied to Al-Qaeda. That's where this entire debate became impossible to ignore. Now pay attention to what Tulsi Gabbard actually argued, because establishment politicians immediately tried twisting her words. She wasn't defending dictators, and she wasn't praising Assad. She was challenging whether Washington learned anything after decades of failed regime change wars, and that's exactly why figures inside the political establishment get uncomfortable whenever Tulsi Gabbard speaks. She talks like someone who has seen the reality of war firsthand, not someone reading talking points from inside a D.C. office. Remember, Tulsi Gabbard served overseas. She wore the uniform. She understands what endless wars cost American families, and that's why people listen when she speaks about foreign policy. This issue goes way beyond politics, because millions of Americans know someone who served overseas: a son, a daughter, a husband, a friend, a neighbor. And after 20 years of nonstop conflict, many veterans came home asking whether America's leaders ever truly understood the wars they kept sending troops into. That's why this hearing struck such a nerve. There is an old saying that the people who push for wars are usually not the ones attending funerals, and right now that reality feels more true than ever. Meanwhile, Mark Kelly looked completely caught off guard, because instead of backing down, Tulsi Gabbard turned the conversation toward accountability, and Washington clearly did not like where that discussion was heading. You could practically feel the hearing go off the rails in real time. because the second Americans start questioning foreign policy failures, the political class gets nervous fast, and honestly, people are exhausted right now. Americans are dealing with inflation, rising housing costs, border chaos, crime, and economic pressure, while Washington keeps pouring billions into overseas conflicts year after year. So naturally, people are asking who actually benefits from all this. What did America gain from these endless interventions? And why does Washington always seem ready for another conflict before the last one even ends? Those are not dangerous questions. That's basic accountability. Whether people agree with Tulsi Gabbard on everything or not, this hearing exposed something much bigger. Trust in the political establishment is collapsing. Americans are tired of polished talking points and scripted answers. People want honesty, accountability, and leaders willing to admit when policies fail. That's why this moment spread across the internet so quickly, because Tulsi Gabbard sounded calm, direct, and prepared, while Mark Kelly looked frustrated that his attack line completely fell apart. And in the end, that's why this hearing mattered, not because somebody scored political points, but because millions of Americans are sick of being dismissed whenever they ask hard questions about war, government accountability, and the direction of this country. If you want more real political coverage without the fake media spin, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. And most importantly, leave your thoughts below, because your voice matters more than Washington wants you to believe.